Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a really in-depth look at this idea of distributed leadership in education.
Okay.
So this is something that's becoming increasingly important, I think, as schools are kind of moving away from that traditional top-down leadership model
Right.
and really trying to embrace more collaborative approaches, especially with, all the challenges that schools are facing these days. We're dealing with a lot of diverse student needs, accountability demands, all these things that are requiring schools to really rethink how they approach leadership.
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, what we're going to be doing is really unpacking what distributed leadership actually is, how it actually works in schools.
Uh-huh.
We're going to explore the benefits, the challenges. We'll look at some different models that are out there, the roles that different stakeholders play, and then ultimately what all this means for things like, improving student achievement, teacher morale, and just the overall kind of culture and feel of a school.
Yeah, and I think you'll find it interesting because we have a lot of sources here that are providing a pretty comprehensive look at this whole area of distributed leadership.
Awesome. So I'm really excited to dive in.
Huh.
So maybe just to kind of start off, let's get clear on like what exactly is distributed leadership.
Yeah.
How would you define it? Like for someone who's maybe hearing this term for the first time.
Well, I think the easiest way to think about it for you to understand it is moving away from the idea that the principal is the sole leader, the only leader,
Right.
and moving toward the idea that leadership can and should be shared among multiple people in the school community.
Okay. So not just limited to people with like the official title of leader,
Yeah.
but really thinking about leadership as actions and as practices
Exactly.
that can be shared and distributed among different people.
Right. And the principal intentionally shares leadership tasks and responsibilities with teachers and other staff in order to, to ultimately achieve better outcomes for the students and for the whole school.
Okay. So it's really a very intentional and purposeful
Yes.
shift.
Yes. Very intentional, very strategic.
Okay.
And it recognizes that leadership isn't some finite resource that's held by, one person, but rather a set of practices, as you said, things that people do.
Yeah.
And it's that synergistic effect that you get when teacher leaders and principals work together.
Uh-huh.
And they can achieve more together than they could on their own.
Okay. So it's like this, it's almost like this idea of like the wisdom of the crowd, but like applied to education.
Exactly. Collective expertise. That the expertise of the whole school community is greater than any single individual's.
Yeah. So tapping into like all the different perspectives and the knowledge that people have within the school.
Right. And that then that leads to a broadening of who gets to make decisions.
Okay.
So it's not just the principal in the office making all the decisions,
Yeah.
but a wider variety of people get to have input and make those decisions.
And I imagine that probably leads to a greater sense of ownership among the staff as well, if they feel like they're actually
Absolutely.
part of the decision-making process.
Right. And one former principal, Beulah McLeod, described it as, encouraging teachers to excel at what they do and empowering them to challenge themselves.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's a very simple way to think about it. You know?
And I think for teachers especially, who are always kind of looking for ways to grow and develop professionally,
Right.
that must be really appealing.
It is. And so it's a flexible and adaptive approach that extends beyond traditional hierarchies.
Okay.
So it includes both formal roles and those informal moments of shared decision-making that we see, in the day-to-day life of the school.
Gotcha.
And it's a shared and collective and extended practice for continuous improvement. The idea is to mobilize the diverse expertise that exists in the school in order to drive innovation.
So it's really about harnessing like the power of all the different people who are part of the school community.
Right. And it's about sharing authority and responsibilities, promoting collaboration, and empowering, everyone involved.
So could that even like extend to students in some cases?
Potentially, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think a crucial point for you to really understand is that it's about the actual practice of leadership rather than just who has a specific title.
Right. So it's not about the nameplate on the door.
Right. It's what they do.
Yeah.
What people actually do on a daily basis.
So how they interact with each other, how they
exactly
make decisions, all of that.
And it's what's often called leadership by expertise,
Okay.
where your influence comes from what you know and what you can do,
Yeah.
not just your position or years of experience.
Gotcha. I see. Now, um, for me, it's helpful to kind of distinguish between distributed leadership and maybe some other concepts that sound similar.
Right. Yeah.
So, for example, like delegation.
Yeah.
How is this different from just, a principal delegating tasks to different people?
Yeah, that's a really important distinction to make, I think.
Yeah.
Because, well, delegation is really about assigning tasks,
Right.
whereas distributed leadership is about empowerment and ownership.
Okay.
So, it's not just saying, here, you handle this specific task, but
Yeah.
rather you have the expertise in this area, so we want you to take the lead on this whole initiative.
Oh, okay.
And then there's also this term distributive leadership, which
Yeah.
is sometimes used interchangeably with distributed leadership.
Right. But distributive leadership is really about the allocation of formal roles.
Okay.
So, who has what position, what title.
Gotcha.
Whereas distributed leadership is about the sharing of the practice of leadership,
Regardless of the title.
regardless of the title, exactly. And then finally, it's also distinct from the traditional hierarchical model,
Right.
where, you have these independent actions dictated by formal roles.
So the principal tells the teachers what to do.
Exactly.
The teachers tell, the students what to do.
Yeah.
And it's very much a top-down kind of approach.
Right. Top down, yeah.
Okay.
Whereas distributed leadership emphasizes interdependent interaction
Okay.
among the various members of the school community.
So it's less about, kind of a chain of command and more about, like, a network of influence, I guess you could say.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's helpful to kind of clarify those distinctions.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess now, kind of moving on to think about, like, what are some of the core principles
Yeah.
that underpin this idea of distributed leadership? What are the kind of the key elements that make it work?
Yeah, well, there's a few core principles that are really essential here
Okay.
for you to keep in mind.
Yeah.
First of all, there's this shared responsibility for the school's vision, goals, and outcomes.
So not just the principal's responsibility.
No, exactly. It's a collective
Yeah,
effort.
everyone's. Okay.
It's everyone's, yeah. Then there's collaborative decision-making,
Uh-huh.
where diverse perspectives are not only welcomed, but actively sought out
Okay.
and valued in shaping the school's direction.
So it's not just about, like, getting everyone in a room and then having the principal make the decision.
Right. No.
It's actually about taking those different perspectives into account.
It's about truly valuing those different perspectives.
Right.
And then, following from that is this idea of collective action.
Okay.
So it's not enough to just make decisions together, but everybody needs to work collaboratively to actually implement those strategies
Right.
and achieve those shared goals.
So it's not just talk, it's actually...
It's action. It's
Yeah.
actually doing something.
Right.
Right. And of course, the principle of leadership by expertise,
Right.
which we talked about earlier, that your influence stems from your knowledge and your capabilities.
Yeah.
And then alongside that, for you to know, is this principle of autonomy.
Okay.
So individuals and teams need to have the freedom to make decisions
Right.
within their areas of responsibility.
But that doesn't mean they're just left on their own to figure it out.
No, exactly.
they-
Need support.
They need support, yeah. So this autonomy must be supported by sufficient capacity, meaning providing them with the tools, resources, and professional development
Right.
that they need to succeed.
Yeah. And of course, with increased autonomy comes accountability.
Right.
So individuals and teams are responsible for the impact of their strategies.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then underpinning all of this is this crucial element of fostering a collaborative school culture.
Okay.
So that's characterized by open communication and mutual support, a constant focus on improving teaching and learning,
Right.
and the formation of teams with clear shared missions and goals.
Okay.
So it's really about creating this environment where people feel comfortable
Right.
sharing their ideas, working together,
Yeah.
and really, supporting each other in this effort to improve the school.
So if I were to walk into a school that was really embodying this idea of distributed leadership,
Yeah.
what are some of the things that I might observe? Like, what would it actually look like in action?
Well, the first thing you might notice for you
Yeah.
is that leadership seems to emerge very naturally from the interaction
Okay.
between different people.
Rather than being solely tied to specific job titles.
So it wouldn't just be the principal who's seen as the leader.
Right.
It would be, different teachers, different staff members
Right.
stepping up and taking on leadership roles in different situations.
Exactly. And the boundaries of who's considered a leader would feel more flexible, less rigid.
Gotcha.
You'd likely see a conscious effort to identify and utilize the diverse expertise and leadership potential that exists throughout the whole school.
Sure.
It would feel like a dynamic community for action
I like that.
where influence shifts depending on who has the most relevant skills and knowledge at that particular time.
So it's very fluid and adaptable, I guess you could say.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
You wouldn't just see the principal making all the decisions.
Right.
But you would see intentional sharing of leadership responsibilities
Okay.
across multiple individuals or teams.
Okay.
And there would be a strong emphasis on collaborative decision-making processes. So everyone would be involved in those decisions.
As much as possible, yeah. And the school would likely be very adaptable
Okay.
and responsive to changing needs and challenges.
Right.
Because that leadership capacity is spread throughout the organization.
So it's not just dependent on one person
Right.
to make all the decisions and figure everything out.
Exactly. And you'd also see authority and decision-making being delegated
Okay.
across different levels,
Yeah.
fostering a strong sense of collaboration and teamwork.
Right.
Shared responsibilities and accountability would be evident.
Okay.
And all of that would be built on a foundation of trust and empowerment.
So it sounds like the overall atmosphere
Yes.
of the school would be one of trust, collaboration,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
shared responsibility.
And you'd see an effective use of the varied skills and perspectives of the staff.
Yeah.
And they would likely be promoting inclusive values, things like democracy, social justice, diversity.
Okay.
And so ultimately for you, leadership at the school level
Yeah.
would feel like it's a result of the ongoing interactions and shared efforts of many people.
Right. So it's not something that's just imposed from the top down.
Right.
It's something that emerges organically from the way that people are working together.
Exactly. Yeah. Leadership as an emergent property.
Okay.
Something that emerges organically from the ongoing actions and interactions of the school community.
Gotcha. So can you give me some concrete examples of what this might look like?
Yeah, sure.
What are some actual things that are happening in schools that are using this distributed leadership model?
Well, think about instructional leadership teams.
Okay.
Where teachers, principals, and other staff collaboratively work together to analyze data, discuss teaching methods, and develop strategies to improve student learning. You could also think about grade level teams or subject specific teams,
Right.
where teachers take the lead in curriculum development and instructional planning,
Okay.
or even teacher-led professional development workshops
Good.
where teachers are sharing their expertise with each other.
Okay.
So these are just some examples of how distributed leadership can manifest itself in the day-to-day operations of a school.
So it can take many different forms, but the underlying principle is this shared responsibility and collaboration.
Right. And I think it's also important to note that even something like a school-wide initiative focused on, improving student well-being, that would require extensive collaboration among, teachers, counselors, administrators. That's also an example of distributed leadership.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's not just limited to academics.
No, not at all.
It can really touch on all different aspects of the school.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. So I guess kind of the next question is why?
Yeah.
What are some of the benefits of doing this?
Right.
Why would a school want to go through the effort of implementing this this model? What are the potential advantages?
Well, there are many, many potential benefits.
Okay.
And for you, the research suggests that there's a positive correlation between distributed leadership and improvements in student achievement.
Okay. So it can actually lead to better outcomes for students.
It can. Yeah.
And how does that work? What is it about this model that leads to those improvements?
Well, one of the things that we see is that when teachers feel a greater sense of ownership,
Okay.
through distributed leadership, they're more likely to To experiment with different instructional strategies.
Okay.
They're more likely to try new things, and to really individualize their instruction to meet the needs of all the different learners in their classroom. And so that can lead to measurable gains, especially for students who might be struggling.
Fair.
So it's not just about, raising the bar for everybody, but it's also about making sure that every student is getting the support that they need to succeed.
Gotcha. So it's very much aligned with that that idea of meeting the needs of diverse learners.
Yes.
That we were talking about earlier.
Very much so, yeah.
Okay. And what about other benefits? Like, what are some of the other things that we see?
Well, another big benefit is increased organizational commitment among teachers.
So they're more likely to stay at the school, more likely to be
Yeah, they feel more invested
in its success.
Right. They feel a stronger sense of belonging and responsibility.
Yeah. Okay.
Which, often leads to higher job satisfaction and, importantly, better retention rates.
Oh, that's huge.
It is, yeah. Especially, with the challenges that schools are facing with teacher turnover.
Right.
Being able to retain good teachers is really crucial.
Yeah. For me, that's like one of the biggest challenges that I see in schools these days.
It is. And distributed leadership can also contribute to overall instructional improvement.
Okay.
Because it fosters this culture of collaboration
Right.
and the sharing of effective teaching strategies.
Right.
So, teachers are learning from each other, they're supporting each other.
Yeah.
And that can lead to real improvements in the classroom.
Yeah.
And then another really significant benefit is that it allows schools to make more effective use
True.
of the diverse talents and expertise that they already have.
Okay.
So, rather than relying on just the principal to be the expert on everything,
Right.
distributed leadership allows schools to really tap into the strengths
Yeah.
of all the different people
Right.
who are part of the school community.
So if you have a teacher who's really good at technology integration, for example,
Yes.
they can take on a leadership role
Exactly.
in that area.
Exactly. And if you have a teacher who's really good at working with students with special needs,
Right.
they can take on a leadership role in that area.
Yeah, and so you're really maximizing the human potential, I guess, within the school.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay. What are some other benefits?
Well, it can also lead to a more powerful form of collective leadership,
Okay.
where the combined impact of teachers and administrators working together
Right.
is greater than what a principal could achieve in isolation.
Okay.
And by sharing the load,
Right.
it can actually free up the principal to
Got it.
focus on other important areas.
So if the principal doesn't have to be involved in every single decision,
Exactly.
then they can focus on like the big picture stuff, the strategic planning.
Right. Exactly. And things like, observing classrooms, working on curriculum development,
Yeah.
Providing coaching and mentorship to teachers.
So those really important instructional leadership tasks.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And it also helps to cultivate a school culture that's built on
Right.
trust,
Right.
collegiality, and a shared sense of responsibility.
Okay.
It creates opportunities for teachers to develop their leadership skills,
Right.
And to contribute to the school in new and meaningful ways.
So it's not just about the students benefiting, it's about
No, it's about everyone benefiting.
the teachers benefiting as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are a lot of potential benefits here.
There are, yeah.
And for me, it seems like, one of the biggest benefits is just this idea of creating this more positive and collaborative work environment
Right.
where people feel valued, they feel empowered,
Right.
and they're really invested in the success of the school.
Exactly. And it increases the overall positive influence on student learning
Okay.
by empowering more adults
Right.
in the school community.
Right. So it's not just the principal who's responsible for student success.
Complete.
It's everyone.
It's everyone, yeah. And it fosters a stronger sense of community.
Okay.
It empowers teachers by valuing their professional judgment.
Oh.
And it creates a more dynamic and responsive leadership system.
Okay.
And you often see more innovative solutions emerging because you have all these diverse perspectives and this collaborative problem-solving approach.
Right.
And that leads to a more inclusive and supportive school culture.
Okay.
It promotes ongoing professional development,
Right.
right? Because
Yeah.
teachers are learning from each other, and that in turn, improves the quality of teaching
Well,
and increases student engagement.
right.
And importantly, by creating this more supportive and collaborative work environment,
Yeah.
it can really help to mitigate teacher burnout.
Oh, that's huge.
It is, yeah.
Because as we were talking about before, that's like a major issue in
Right.
schools today.
It is, yeah.
So if this model can help to reduce that burnout,
Yeah,
that's a huge benefit.
it is, yeah. And from an organizational standpoint, for you, distributed leadership can lead to a higher quality of work
Okay.
through more efficient and well-informed decision making.
Okay.
Giving individuals and teams greater autonomy fosters trust,
Hmm.
and that in turn boosts commitment, productivity, and a sense of ownership.
So it's kind of like a virtuous cycle,
Yes, yeah.
The more you empower people, the more they're invested,
Right.
and the better the outcomes are for everyone.
And you often see increased creativity
Yeah.
as more voices are heard, more ideas are generated,
Right.
more opportunities for mutual learning and knowledge sharing
Okay.
among colleagues. And it provides more educators with opportunities to lead,
Right.
which, boosts overall engagement
Yeah.
and leads to more cooperative and effective solutions to challenges.
And-
It fosters a culture of openness and a stronger belief in the organization's mission.
Okay.
And it also helps with succession planning
Okay.
by developing leadership capacity at all levels.
Okay.
So, you're not just relying on one or two people
Right.
to lead the school, but you're developing that capacity throughout the
So
organization.
that if someone leaves, there are other people who are ready to step up.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah. And it inspires teamwork and collaboration. It builds the school's resilience in the face of challenges.
Okay.
Because you have more people who are able to adapt and respond to those challenges.
Right.
It increases overall accountability because responsibility is shared.
Okay.
It empowers team members to take initiative, and ultimately, it strengthens that sense of school-wide ownership.
Yeah. So it really seems like there are benefits, for everyone involved,
Yes.
for the students, for the teachers,
Yeah,
for the administrators, for the school as a whole.
absolutely. Yeah. And, going back to our outline here,
Yeah.
those benefit supporting snippets
Yes.
really resonate now.
Yeah.
Things like accelerated and sustained school reform,
Uh-huh.
potential for enhanced collective leadership,
Right.
and especially mitigates teacher burnout.
Yes.
Those are all key areas of concern
For
in
sure.
education today.
And for me, those are the things that really stand out
Yeah.
as being really important benefits of this model.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about all these great benefits.
Yeah.
But, I'm sure it's not all sunshine and roses.
Right.
There must be some challenges,
Of
right?
course.
Like, what are some of the things that schools need to be aware of if they're thinking about implementing this model?
Yeah, well, it's not a guaranteed success,
Right.
and there are definitely some potential hurdles
Yeah.
for you to be aware of.
Good.
One common challenge is role ambiguity.
Okay.
When leadership responsibilities are shared,
Right.
it can sometimes be unclear who's ultimately responsible for what,
Okay.
and that can lead to confusion, delays in decision-making,
Right.
and a lack of clear accountability.
Yeah.
You might also encounter conflicting priorities
Okay.
among the various individuals and teams
Mhm.
involved in shared leadership.
Right.
And that can make it difficult to maintain a unified direction
Okay.
and to work towards those common goals.
Yeah, so it's really important to be clear about who's responsible for what
Yeah,
and to make sure that everyone's on the same page
exactly.
in terms of the goals that they're working toward.
Exactly, yeah. And let's face it, sharing authority can sometimes lead to power struggles.
Right.
As individuals navigate,